All right, we are live here at 7 o'clock for our mental health chat. And yes, well, we had Ripley. We lost her. We lost her quick. Oh, no. And I also already got a thumbs up. See, I didn't even do anything. You guys already know my hair's all messed up. Look at this mess. This crazy wild man pastor. You guys already knew that you liked me enough that you gave me a heart before or a thumbs up before I did anything cool. Or maybe you just saw Ripley and that would give me a thumbs up immediately. Okay, so we are here for a mental health chat, and I'm going to say this part a few different times. So we're going to try something new. We are going to have, basically this kind of started to happen last week anyway. Oh, I got a bunch of thumbs up. I got 3 already. Wow, that's awesome. So we kind of had this happen organically last week a little bit. And so we're going to try to expand it where somebody, I got another thumbs up, 4 likes. I love it. Thanks, guys. We had somebody texting or telling their questions to somebody else who then was like chatting with me about it. Oh, that reminds me. I want to make sure I can see text messages while I do this chat. So what we're going to do is we're going to give out my mental health number. So this works for texts and calls, but probably not call. Yeah, pin the number probably. Good idea. Okay, so I'm going to put in the chat the number, which is 772-303-3034. And you can text your questions if you want to have it be completely anonymous what you are trying to say. Okay, so pin message, there we go. And we should be good. Okay, so you can text that number at any time and let us know your questions, and then they're 100% confidential. So that's a cool way that we wanted to do it, because we found out that basically there are some people that weren't asking a lot of questions because I got another thumbs up. Thank you, guys. They weren't texting their questions because they basically felt, I don't know, shy, worried that people are going to judge them for their questions maybe. So at any time during the chat, you can text that number, your questions, and then I will respond to those as well as the ones. Okay, now I'm remembering something else I wanted to do today. As well as the ones in the chat. So you still can do the normal chat that we always did before. Okay, but if you wanted to do a more anonymous question and not have it be recorded in the chat, then feel free to just text that number and we will respond. Okay. But what we do, for those of you who may be new to this chat, is we just chat about mental health issues from 7 to 8 on Sunday at Sunday. This is 7 o'clock Eastern time. And we talk about different mental health stuff. Steve is wondering if it can be harder to be healthy as a therapist educated in mental health. Okay, so by the way, Steve is our code. If we get a real Steve, we're going to have to switch code, but Steve is our anonymous person. So that's probably, might be a text we already got from that number of the chat, okay? So can it be harder to be healthier as a therapist educated in mental health? No, I think it's actually the opposite. I think it's way easier. But I will say, when I first started practicing mental health, I remember that I started to get jealous of my clients because all of their lives were getting better. I was giving them advice. Hey there, wave back. I don't call out who I'm saying hi to for everyone. I mean, I could say that your pin name, but I don't say the real name, just even though I know who you are. And I love you. But anyway, because I try to keep it as anonymous as possible. But all that to say, I was jealous of my clients. All their lives were getting better. And I thought to myself, man, I wish I had a therapist like me who was, giving me this kind of advice. And then my brain went, you idiot, you could do this, like, for yourself. Why don't you practice what you preach? Why don't you do these exercises that you keep telling people to do? And it was like the thought just first occurred to me. It's like, oh yeah, I can be doing all the things that I recommend. So I started doing that, and it made a big difference. And don't get me wrong, I went to therapy for 2 years before I was a therapist. And I went into getting my master's degree in therapy because therapy was so helpful for me. I thought at the time I knew a lot, studied about pop psychology, so I thought I kind of knew the gist of what mental health had to offer. And I had no idea that I was really just scratching the surface of the tools that were out there. Like, for instance, acceptance and commitment therapy. I literally looked for the specific thing that I end up finding in acceptance and commitment therapy and couldn't find it. Like, I was looking for something. I'm like, man, I'm not an addict. It's not like I'm primarily suffering from depression or anxiety, although I had aspects of both of those at different seasons of my life. I just felt really stuck. And I'm like, there's got to be some form of therapy designed to just help people get unstuck. And I literally couldn't find it. Looked for it, Googled it, And then when I became a therapist, studying for my master's degree, I stumbled on acceptance and commitment therapy. And literally the primary goal in acceptance and commitment therapy ACT is psychological flexibility. And it's all about getting unstuck. So all that to say, there are all these mental health tools out there. And I'm not trying to, now here's the frustrating part, okay? Because it's asked the question, can it be harder to be healthy as a therapist or educated in mental health? There is this frustrating aspect of it that sometimes you know the right thing to do. You know exactly what you're supposed to do. And you either don't want to do it because you just want to do the unhealthy thing. That's annoying. Or it's like you're just not ready to be healthy yet for that thing. And it's really hard to admit that you are aware that you're unhealthy in a certain aspect of your life, that you know the steps you could be making to be healthy. It's like that Carl Jung quote of like, people will do absolutely anything to not see themselves. That seeing yourself, knowing that you need to get healthy on an issue, knowing the right steps to take, but still not feeling ready to take it and just being like, yeah, I'll do that eventually. But in the meantime, I'm going to do something else. Right. I think that part is harder to do as a therapist because at least for me, you're well aware, the right thing to do a lot of the times, and then you don't always do it. And it's hard not to beat yourself up when that's the case and give yourself grace. Steve thinks they are the child of parentification. They would like some tips on developing a better relationship with the parent, although the parent isn't super keen on changes. Yeah. So what therapy is, in a lot of ways, is reparenting yourself. Like, that's a lot of the mental health stuff. And the therapist, in some ways, I wouldn't say the therapist really works as your dad or your mom. Like, that's not what a good therapist does. What a good therapist does is gives you the right tools and helps you see how you can actually reparent yourself. So in some ways, we're not reparenting you, but we are helping you reparent yourself. You become, when you're dealing with a parent that isn't super healthy and doesn't have a positive impact on your life and is not willing to change, you are, hold on, I'm multitasking a little bit here. You are going to run into problems unless you decide that you're going to be actively, intentionally part of the process of reparenting yourself, if that makes sense. So essentially, it's like you have to be willing to be your own parent in those situations. And then after you are your own parent, it's really easier. It's a lot easier to accept your parent as they are, not as they should be, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. So I'm going to keep responding to chats. And oh, wait, there was another one. Do you think a bad therapist is more helpful than no therapy? Yes. What would a bad look like? Okay. So, I mean, obviously, it depends a little bit on what we mean when we say a bad therapist, because, like, obviously, if we're talking about somebody who is like truly abusive and manipulative, but I think that's very rare. What most bad therapists are, in my mind, are there's some usually they're good conversationalists. So, like, even a bad therapist will help you with conversationalists. A bad therapist also is giving you advice and very quickly. So, like, a bad therapist is just like, oh, you should try this. Have you tried, or actually, have you tried that is better, right? Because even the worst is when a therapist, you tell them what you're struggling with, and then they prescribe, like, you should do this, 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 and this, right? As if they're doing something to fix your problems, and they never even asked you, what have you tried before? What's worked? What helped? What hurt? And then kind of work from there. So a good therapist asks a lot of questions. Not that they'd never educate. When I'm doing these chats, it's pretty much mostly education, right? Because we're not going through the same process of therapy. This is hopefully an aid to therapy, but this is not a replacement of therapy, because the process of going through where you can give your actual story and then I can ask helpful guiding questions is a huge part of therapy. I'm going to be really honest. I'm not saying that I had a bad therapist. I don't think she watches these, but I didn't have a great therapist. I don't think she was the best therapist. I think that she had a few very helpful things to offer me, but at the very least, it still was a sounding board. So there's a lot of ways, a bad therapist can be a bad therapist. They're a fixer. That's a bad therapist. They're a validator. They just are telling you what you want to hear. What I think, one is what makes, let me make this a positive. What makes a good therapist in my mind is one, pattern recognition, even if it's you. So a good therapist can hear somebody telling their story and recognize that even if in the person's mind they are constantly running up against the same problems, but that's the world or other people and not their problem, a good therapist can help them gradually and lovingly see an empowering way they could improve, right? As they say in the rooms, like, what's your part, right? They can help you see your part in it. So that's where they challenge instead of just validating how you feel, empowering you. Another thing is a good therapist is skill-based. So they're going through a method, even if it's multiple integrated. They have a theory that they're working with, that is a roadmap that other people have done before, and they're giving you skill-based exercises to work on, right? So that could be homework. It could be just principles that they're teaching you through, but they're trying to give you a process. So they're giving you baby steps. I had this one person say that this wasn't a client, this is a friend, but that they're a hard client for therapists because they already know what their problem is. So they have the awareness. They just don't want to do anything to fix it. And I kind of even mentioned how I've been in that place before personally. A good therapist, and this is what would be helpful for me if I had a therapist. A good therapist would then say, here are some baby steps that are positive actions that will get you headed in the right direction that you are willing to take, and work with you on that. Steve is in a committed relationship with someone he is happy with, but he wants advice on his commitment issues. Yeah. So here's one of the things that you have to be aware of as you struggle with attachment stuff. Now, there's 4 different styles of attachment. One is secure. And if you have secure attachment, good for you. Yeah, life must be great. You have no problems. Everything is wonderful. No, that's not true. But that part is not the issue. Okay, at least. So if you have secure attachment, that is great. Then there is fear-based or disorganized attachment, where you desire a relationship, but you're scared of it. Then there's anxious attachment, where you are constantly working to try to make sure people don't leave you because you think if you don't do enough, people will leave you. Ironically, these people usually are stage 5 clingers, and people then want to get away from them because they actually snuff out the flame, putting too much on it. And then there's avoidant people that, while they probably want a relationship, their tendency is just to avoid an issue when it arises. So they just kind of dismiss and don't lean into romantic relationships. So with those 3 insecure attachment styles, here's the irony. You are going to feel almost certainly more anxious, more insecure as you get healthier in that relationship. Why? Because there's a part of your brain that the happier you are in that relationship, the better it's going, the more your brain goes, oh crap, I can't afford to lose this person. And if I do, I'm going to be screwed. So, and it's like, it knows that if you keep moving forward in a healthy way, you're just going to get more and more attached, and it's going to hurt even more when the person leaves you. So there's kind of this protective mechanism that kicks in and triggers all this commitment issues. And one of the things that I would say is, like so many anxious thoughts, I think this is kind of interesting. They did a study of people with anxious thoughts, and then they did a follow-up where they looked at how many of their worries came true. And it was somewhere between 0 and 10%. So they had nobody that scored higher than 10%. And some people, literally none of the things they worried about are true. And it just lets you know that even the most accurate worriers, according to that study, are wrong 90% of the time. And some people are literally wrong 100% of the time of the things they worry about. So when you have these worries, these commitment issues, these feelings of nervousness, think of it as like a wave, and you want to ride it out. You let it rise, you let it fall, and you don't overreact. Because if you do and try to fix the wave, it's like basically you have to accept the feeling as it comes and not change the rhythm of your relationship to try, if you can, right? It's like we all have to work within our limitations to not trigger your commitment issues. Because if you do try to pace the relationship based on your commitment issues, you're going to get stuck in a tumultuous rhythm. And you're actually going to be creating relationship instability as a method to try to not feel those commitment issues. And that is actually going to ironically prolong the commitment issues, if that makes sense. Thanks. I got another thumbs up. Appreciate those thumbs up. Helps with the algorithm. Man, I'm loving this. Not only are we getting more questions from Steve, we got more viewers and we got more thumbs up. So this is good. Keep those questions coming. Also, you can always ask the questions in the chat. I mentioned recently that there's a number there that is a number you can text. It's pinned in the chat, 772-303-3034. So feel free to text any of your questions that you might want to keep anonymous. Steve wants to know why being a lone wolf is a bad thing. Well, I wonder if that's the same person that has the commitment issues. So it is a bad thing because we are built for community. We are built for connection. It's one of the things that is the biggest sign of health. So going back to that attachment issue stuff, people that have secure attachments, they realize from childhood that the more that they're around parents, the safer they are because their parents were loving and supportive and healthy, right? The more they're around family, the safer they are. There's an ironic thing here, like that kind of actually shows up. Let's use actually a lone wolf, almost literal example. So if I was in the woods, right, I'm an introvert, so I like to be in solitude. The more I'm alone in the woods in solitude, the less safe I am. Like then if some emergency happened, I'd be in trouble. And if I was worried, like I don't trust people, right? People are always selfish. People are always hurting people, right? So then I'm going to be isolating to try to protect myself from large groups of people because I feel unsafe in those large groups of people. But ironically, what ends up happening is I have now made myself a target for predators who are going to be looking for people who are isolated. So these people that feel like I can't trust people and have often long patterns of abuse, of being abused, I mean, they set themselves up to be abused again by isolating themselves, which then makes them a more likely target by somebody who might want to do them harm. So basically, a lone wolf is not only not having community and not only having connections, they are making themselves a target for abusive people, for people that are going to be more likely to take advantage of them. And if they were in a group of a lot of people, yes, sure, there might be a abusive person or a person that would want to take advantage of them. Most people are going to be somewhere in the middle, kind of sheep, but there are going to be more likely people that will stand up, defend them, and support them, and they'll be far safer the larger network that they have. And every evidence-based thing that we study says the same thing, that the larger our group of social network is, the safer that we tend to be. Now, there's obviously caveats to all of this because you can have a large group when nobody really knows you, and you're not really super connected to them. You want to have genuine attachments with people that you can be transparent with. And that's probably not going to be a huge group. I can give you real numbers if you want. So there's like a 3, 10 to 12, and 150 as the 3 different numbers. Now that's not, you get to choose which of those 3, by the way. Those are the 3 different categories. Got another thumbs up. I appreciate it. And this are actually fairly evidence-based. 3 people that are like essentially, family, and it's, 3 is it's a general number. It doesn't have to be exactly 3, but like 3 accountability partners, 3 genuine, close, intimate friends, 10 to 12, good small group. That's even in it's funny. There's like the 12 disciples. That is the biblical number. But it actually bears itself in evidence-based things. They say the same thing for small groups. Your small group, that's like your close friends, should be about 10 to 12 people. And then 150 is the, it's like Dunham's number, I think it's called. But it's basically the number tribes fit into. So over 150, you really can't genuinely know people. The human brain can only have about 150 connections. So you should have about 150 in your broad circle, according to evidence, about 10 to 12 in your close circle, and about 3 in your intimate friend circle. Do you find it is typically do you find it typically to be a good thing if people stack major, here's Ripley, the stars coming for a brief appearance, star of the show, Ripley. She doesn't say a lot about mental health, but just being around her makes me feel more mentally healthy. And she's cute to look at. And beauty is a virtue. And she is beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. There's evidence based on that too, right? Just being around a cat makes people happier. Cat butts, even cat butts, signs of affection. See, they're saying hi to you, Ripley. She's the real pro. Yeah. It's like, she's the mental health professional. She doesn't even have to study. She just does it naturally. She's the mental health prodigy. Okay, I'm going to go back to the question. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have kept petting you. How rude of me. Okay, I'm like leaning down to see because I want to make sure that she's getting the spotlight. Okay, where are we? Do you find it typically to be a good thing if people stack major life changes? Example: divorce or loss followed by move, job change, new relationship. Yeah, like with man, Ripley. Everybody's saying hi to you. That's the most active we've had the chat. That's because you're so pretty and wonderful. So like with a lot of therapy questions, the answer is going to be it depends. So you could be setting yourself up for instability and problems if you keep going from, like one change to another. But like, so, and like I've been through a divorce, and what I would have said to me if I could go back in time is don't try to make it better. Like, let yourself go through the process, let yourself feel the feelings, and give yourself time before you heal, because sometimes we can make things worse by trying to make it better as quickly as possible. Now, that's my tendency anyway, naturally. So like, I'm a little bit more of a, or at least I was once, more of a type A personality, go getter, achiever, push. How can I make more effort and try harder? And so that was one of the errors that I fell into. There are people that have obviously the opposite problem, and they can be overly passive and fall into, so it's like acceptance and commitment therapy, right? There are people that naturally are good at accepting, but not great at committing. And then there are people that are really, commit all over the place, but not very good at accepting reality as it is. So what I will say in terms of stacking major life changes is that it is good to go to post-traumatic growth principles, where you start to come up with a new story, a new identity that encompasses the change that you had. So if you have divorce or a loss, okay, you might want to move into a new identity. Now, I'd be careful about some of those big life changes like move, job, or new relationship, but start with incorporating that story as you process, right, the divorce or the mourning, into a larger picture of your life story, if that makes sense. Let me know if there's a follow-up question on that. Steve wants to know if a super unhealthy dynamic can become healthy, or if there's a line of no return. So the implication, I think, in that question is one of a romantic relationship. Okay, so I'm going to answer that assuming that that's what you're talking about. And I would say, and that would be true of any relationship, a familial relationship as well, that it's way harder, not twice as hard, to change in a relationship dynamic. It is 10 times harder to change at a relationship dynamic than to change individually. Why is that? Because the rhythm of change. So going back to the loss thing for like mourning, I'm gonna try to see if I can. Now I'm like all chill. I'm chilling, trying to find a good spot that's still got Ripley in the picture because she's such a cutie. Yeah, you're a good girl. Okay, what were we talking about? Mourning. Okay, so if you're mourning somebody, wait, what was it mourning that I was talking about? I was talking about going from a healthy dynamic to an unhealthy dynamic. Is there a line of no return? Oh yeah, mourning. Okay, so they say everybody grieves in their own way. What that means is, in a practical level, that like your rhythm of the process of grief, now there are stages of grief, right? And that's been famous of like a therapy tool of like bartering, and there we go. Okay. I was like, I knew she was going to leave eventually. Bartering, anger, acceptance. What was the other one? Anyway, the different stages of grief. They found out as they studied them that they do exist, but they don't exist linear. So you might be in the angry stage and somebody else is in the denial. That's the other one. In the denial stage, and you're going to find there's more conflict. So when it comes to unhealthy dynamics in relationships, the problem is, to change that dynamic, you need both people to be on the same rhythm in their stage of change. It is far easier and often would be better for people to create some, if not space in the relationship, change in circumstances of the relationship to try to change that dynamic. Follow up to previous, can you elaborate on the identity changes? How to get used to a new identity you didn't anticipate? Yeah. So what we naturally try to do as people that have gone through what I call a bubble popping experience, where all of a sudden our life changes in a way that we didn't do anything to instigate, at least intentionally, and we didn't expect, is to try to get back in the bubble, and the bubble is gone. So take your time if you have to mourn the loss of that bubble, but we need to come up at a certain point as quickly as we can with a bigger bubble, right? With a new story. And it does unfortunately have to encompass the loss, right? It's got to be part of it. If I could have never gone through a divorce, I would have. Now divorce is going to be part of my story. It is just my reality. There are other things in my story. Those of you who know me well know a lot of aspects of my story I absolutely would white out if I could, but they are part of my story. So the people that do the best in post-traumatic growth, we found, are people that have made the loss part of their new identity and their new story. So I'll give you a great example of this guy that I didn't actually meet yet, but a friend of mine introduced me to him digitally, virtually. So we've texted, but he has a story where he lost his sister to suicide. And instead of shying from that story, instead of hiding from that story, he has made it part of his story to try to instill hope in others, and went into, I don't know exactly how to describe what he does. Maybe leadership management was the term, but basically goes around speaking as a consultant, working with businesses, working with organizations, working with individuals to instill hope, and using the story of the loss and the disconnection that happened with his sister to try to make sure everyone has hope and connection, right? So his new identity is encompassing the loss of his trauma, right? Now, it doesn't actually have to be that blatant in every situation. It can be, a little bit less in your face, but that's the principle, is that we want to take our story and make it a little bigger to create a bigger identity that, it's like, so there's a principle in ACT called self as context versus self as content. Self as content is rigid, and so it's easy to get stuck in it. If you go, my identity is I'm a mother, right? It's one of the things that I most value about myself. It's one of the things I cling to when it comes to who I am. And then all of a sudden your relationship with your kids starts struggling, or you become an empty nester, you're going to have an existential crisis, right? Or I don't know why I thought of him right now, but David Goggins, this running guy, even wrote in his second book, I think I got another thumbs up. Thank you guys. about a season where he had to stop running because of problems with his leg and how he had a mental breakdown. I'm not trying to dog on anybody, even a celebrity, but like, yeah, therapy is necessary in that situation, right? Because, or working on the inner stuff, because if we rely on an identity that's built on I'm a runner, or an identity that's built on I'm a mother, that self is content and it's not a healthy self identity. We want to look at ourselves in a more contextual way, right? We want to take advantage of the flexibility and being able to observe ourselves and look at this deeper understanding of who we are that isn't relying on a certain role. One thing I've said before, so most of you heard this before that know me well, roles are like outfits. And when I say roles, I mean like the role of a mother, the role of a friend, the role of a pastor, the role of a counselor, the role of a runner, right? These self content identities, they're like outfits. Even if they fit you really well, if you wear them night and day, eventually they're going to start to stink, right? So if you over-identify with a role and you constantly keep it on all the time, you even start to refer to yourself as if you are that thing, it's going to start to smell, right? You have to take off those roles. That's the persona, the way of presenting yourself in the world is not actually who you are. Who you are is something more contextual, which means it varies depending on situation. If we live in a cognitive reality, isn't it our own belief system that drive our identities, and therefore the shadow self or undiscovered identity would be the biggest obstacle to love others? Okay, there's a lot there with that question. Okay, if we live in a cognitive reality, isn't our own belief system that drives our identity? Absolutely. So that is what the ego really clinically is. So I do think the ego has a sense of pride or self-loathing, right? But we sometimes say, oh, you're being egotistical, as being like you're being prideful. But what we really mean clinically is that you are overly focusing on your own identity or the way that you self-reference your, so in other words, if you're listening to the self-critic and evaluating how you are doing all the time, that isn't a healthy system, right? So that is your own belief system driving your identity. And that's another reason why lone wolf isn't great, right? You overly end up focusing on your own identity, which actually can lead to depression, ironically. Okay, and therefore, this is the next part, he said, the shadow self, which is the parts of yourself that you don't like, so you put it in the unconscious, or the undiscovered identity, would be the biggest obstacle to love others. It does make it hard to connect if we have a shadow that we haven't incorporated into ourselves. It will often arise in romantic relationship conflicts because your partner is going to see your shadow better than you are. And actually, one of the things that I think is brilliant about Peter Pan, I'm a big fan of fairy tales and myths. I actually have like a whole section on my bookshelves. So there's like a philosophy section, and then like right under it, or above it, mythology, and right under it, fairy tales, because I think there's so much truth and wisdom in those fairy tales that we diminish those, but they're actually very deep. So all that to say, Wendy, I think, is the one with Peter Pan, has to sew on the shadow to Peter Pan when the shadow escapes. And that is so true. That is so what ends up happening in most of the situations. Lovingly, hopefully, right? But it is going to be painful. Our partners weave in what our shadow self, they reveal to us, they mirror our shadow selves and show us, hey, you do that. That's part of who you are, right? That's one of your tendencies. And we never love that, usually. Follow-up. How do you build an identity not based on a role? So here's a kind of existential, self-observant self question. This is not going to be an answer to that question. It's going to be an exercise to reveal to you the muscle that is going to be most helpful in achieving that. Okay. Right now, wherever you are, think about what the back of your head looks like, right? Picture yourself, right? And actually do it in your imagination. Picture yourself from above and behind and see yourself observing you, right? Where are you in that imagination at that moment? Because even though there's a chance that what you're visualizing right now is inaccurate, it's a very small chance. Most likely, when you're picturing what you look like, right? Like right now, I'm picturing me standing behind the wall and looking down at the red couch and seeing myself move, right? Is actually very accurate. That is the muscle. That is the observing self muscle that sees you beyond just what you're stuck in the moment, right? And when you look at that in that exercise, you can start to build and see, what identity do I want? It's like you're creating a choice. Okay. I know that sounds really existential and maybe that's too out there for some of you, and that's okay. But the way you build an identity not based on a role is by learning to tap into that observing self and see that you have options and choices and you're beyond what option you've taken in the past, right? Does that make sense? Let me know if they need a follow-up question. Steve wants to know what to do to make people stop screwing them over again and again. Okay. Okay. So let me say this. Okay. So this is a hard thing to address because I'm not trying to say, Steve, it's your fault that people keep screwing you over and over again. Right. I'm not trying, but we have to accept the world as it is, not as we would have it. Right. I can tell you that there is usually now some things just happen, right? Like you could call me very privileged in some ways because I was born into a family. I had some stuff that sucked, like migraines from childhood that were chronic and every day. And I was suicidal because of them. I never got along with peers and that wasn't really my problem. I think it was in certain environments and cultures I would have done well. But I was isolated and alone and felt no one understood me. But I had two loving parents and had that healthy, secure attachment. I've had things happen randomly that were not my fault. But looking back, even at some of those, there were choices that I made. And so what we want to do in balancing and empowering to not continue to set ourselves up for success is not see ourselves as to blame for the problem. That would be wrong. That would be over responsibility. So here's the nuance. But we want to see that we do, going back to that observant self, right? We do have choices. We do have options of how we interact with people and how we set ourselves up. And usually if there's a pattern of someone setting themselves up to screw them over and over again, usually if someone's being screwed over and over again, there's a rhythm, there's a reason. They are setting themselves up for that, right? And it's not easy to walk into that new identity, but we can, and baby step it, go slow, but that will help, right? If that makes sense. Let me know if you need a follow-up question. Please give an example of the shadow self coming out in a relationship and the other person sees it before you do. Okay, so like I know this already. So this has happened multiple times in multiple different kind of relationships, romantic, friends, family. And I'm aware of it now, but like me identifying my shadow. So I'm very open-minded and non-judgmental as a person. But I will have a consistent theme of my partner saying that I'm very argumentative or opinionated or even judgmental, right? It's not that is true and I'm wrong about all those things, because I just said I am very open-minded. I am very non-judgmental. I am very loving, right? But my shadow isn't. My shadow is argumentative. My shadow is a Pharisee, right? My shadow is judgmental, legalistic, right? So often that'll show up in the relationship. The person that I'm, closest to will be like, you're kind of jerk sometimes, right? There's ways to do it that are loving, and there's ways to do it that are harsh and will follow with defensiveness and and arguments. But that's Wendy. That's Wendy's role of trying to help us to see our tendencies, and hopefully in the most loving way possible. All right, where are we? The most poignant part of me of the sewing back on the shadow in Peter Pan is the fact that not only did he need the help of another, but he needed to be still, as Psalms 46:10 says. And I think that is, be still and know that I am God. I never really like giving the Bible address and not the context. But anyway, let me know if I'm wrong on that. But anyway, yes, he needs to be still in that process. So that goes back to that, when the person shows you the shadow and your first reaction is defensiveness, right? Which is natural. Steve asked what a shadow is. Okay, so the shadow is the part of yourself that you don't like. So you shove it into your unconscious. So doing shadow work is really tricky. Like when you first start shadow work, it's kind of like how do I do this? Because I can't see it, right? Because most of the time the shadow is very evasive. And if you haven't watched the Peter Pan cartoon, it is I might watch the Peter Pan cartoon tonight. Just to remind myself, it's a really good one. But anyway, they do a really good job of having that little scene with the shadow where Peter Pan and his shadow become separated. So they're no longer incorporated. They're not attached. And he's like trying to catch it to get it back with him, but it's like evasive. It's jumping around. It's quicker than him, right? Our shadow can seem really big one moment and then really small the next. So you might be genuinely, like I said, for me, genuinely a very loving person who's open-minded and non-judgmental and curious. And you might have a shadow self that is very legalistic, that, is like a know-it-all, right? It doesn't mean that that's who you are, right? Because your shadow isn't who you are. It is an aspect of your personality that you don't like, that you shove into the unconscious. It usually shows up. So if you've never done shadow work, the first way to find it is, who are the people that you tend to resent and have a problem with most often, right? Who are the people that you dislike, not as a person, right? Not I dislike Bob, although he could be the person that you dislike. And then you go, what about Bob? And you realize, it's that they have all the same traits that I can have at my worst. They're a shadow reflection of yourself, right? But more like with commonality of traits, right? So I tend to not like people who tend to do these things. Yeah, there's probably an aspect of yourself that does the same things. Okay. Someone just said, okay. Steve wants to know how, I don't know how to respond to Steve wants to know how to not let fear of infidelity get in the way of successful relationship. Great question. Okay, I love that one. So that is another paradox that I find comes up so often in therapy. I have so many couples counseling situations where people get stuck doing things. Now, with human beings, there's no guarantee. With animals, you can predict it, right? With animals, they cannot help but be in their nature. Human beings have choice, so human beings have agency. So it is not your fault when somebody cheats on you, but you still do have influence. And there is nothing you can do to influence someone more into possibly cheating on you than trying to make sure they don't cheat on you. It's like, it is sad. It's a paradox again. Here we are, but this is like the pattern that we see again and again. People are so afraid, and it's on the front of their mind, that they're going to get cheated on. So they try to do things to prevent that from happening. And guess what? Predictably, almost everything that you do to try to make it more likely that you're not going to get cheated on makes being cheated on more likely to happen, which is all, again, why there's typically people that have never been cheated on and people that have been cheated on a whole bunch. The only, of course, there's variety, thank God, and for people. And some people, luck out and they got cheated on once and then never again by the same partner, or they got another partner and they just happen to be with somebody who's undefiable and unwilling to cheat no matter what happens. But typically people do respond to conditioning. They do respond to influence. And if you are going to talk about being cheated on with your partner, you are making it more likely that you're being cheated on. If you are trying to track your partner so that you don't get cheated on, you are making it more likely that you are going to get cheated on. If you are questioning why they're saying things or who they're with or what they're doing, you are making it more likely that you're going to get cheated on. So here comes the question, right? What do you do in the fear of infidelity? And it's the same thing with the whole attachment stuff we talked about earlier. You have exposure therapy. You have to allow yourself to feel those fears of infidelity and not go to your partner for information to quell them, because you're reinforcing the fear every time you do. So if you are fearing infidelity, and there's caveats to this, okay? Exceptions exist. But generally speaking, it would be better to let the fear come and let the fear go. And the only thing that you should ask for your partner is affirmation, not information, right? Is asking them just to help you feel a little bit more secure and loved, asking for a compliment, but not directly addressing what has created that feeling of insecurity. Again, in general. That's not a hard, fast rule. Don't hold that as gospel. But if the majority of time you feel insecure about the relationship, you are interrogating your partner, you are making it more long-term likely that you will be cheated on. Follow up, would you consider it similar to when strict parents have rebel kids? Yeah, so if you are like, and this is like so frustrating to watch sometimes, like a therapist, because you see people trying to fix the problem with more of the problem, right? The rebel kid needs to know that they have worth, to know that you have confidence in them. They need it to be progressive. So it needs to be gradual. It needs to be giving them freedom and responsibility very slowly. Start with very little freedom and responsibility and build that as you build their trust and faithfulness, right? And consistency. But every time your kid rebels, if you restrict them more, you're actually reinforcing their instinct to rebel. You're reinforcing their desire to rebel, and you're making it more long-term likely that they're going to be rebellious. So you are actually conditioning them to be rebellious in what you are considering the cure to their rebellion. It's like, oh man, this is why it's, to me, studying psychology and counseling and mental health stuff can be like a superpower, because you see, I mean, it's sometimes frustrating because you see the patterns and you can't get people to stop them sometimes, but you see, like, there's another option here. In my opinion, feeling cheated is a construction of the ego. Yeah, and I mean, look, I'm not trying to minimize how much it hurts to be cheated on, but if you set it as the primary goal in your relationship to not be cheated on again, you're not ready for a relationship. You need therapy. You need to work on yourself. You need to process. You need to heal. Got another thumbs up. Thank you, guys. But you should not be in a relationship if your primary focus is making sure you never get cheated on again. Okay? Or you could be with a partner that no one else would want to be with. Like, you could find the most revolting person you can possibly like that is an option, I guess. But I wouldn't recommend that. What I'd recommend is processing in therapy and then slowly letting yourself come to terms with that feeling. So exposure therapy is very slow and methodical in its best form. And that's hard to do in relationship stuff, but it isn't impossible, right? We gradually and consistently expose ourselves to things that make us feel more insecure. And whether it's the attachment issue or the worry that somebody's going to cheat on us, we want to gradually be comfortable with the feeling of that fear. And this is the whole irony, the paradox. When I accept the things about myself that I don't like, they paradoxically and automatically start to change. That's Carl Rogers who said that. When I accept the feeling of insecurity that I might be cheated on, and I don't react to it, I just process through it and continue to move forward, that feeling diminishes. That feeling no longer has victory over me. I wonder if feeling like you're being cheated on or taken advantage of in business could be related to past personal relationships. Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, generalization, I think we talked about this briefly last week. Racism, bigotry, all of those are usually products of having what is a lot of times the family of origin is where it starts. So that's most common with attachment stuff. But it's like we weren't safe in childhood, and now we always feel cheated on. We always feel taken advantage of, and we're spotlighting it and hyper vigilant and looking for it, and then making it more likely that it's going to continue to happen. The ego is not the enemy, only the parts I don't like to admit. The facets I wish to not face are my fall from grace. That's poetically said. It's like, it kind of depends on what we consider our enemy, right? So I would say the ego is the enemy in some ways, but we should love our enemy. Like, that's the principle that we're called to do, right? So in other words, our self-identity can be our enemy for growth, right? Because it's a fixed mindset. But I should approach it in a way that's super loving. Now, you might say I'm being semantical here, and maybe I am a little bit, right? Because you could say it's not my enemy, it's my friend. Because that's also true, right? It just depends on how you want to approach it. There's no part of you that is irrevocably broken. Even the parts of you that you don't like are redeemable. And there's something good and lovable in that thing, right? There's even a book called No Bad Parts, and that brings us, we're at the end of the hour, so we can't really go into all of it, but internal family systems therapy, which is a very weird approach to therapy, but it does help some people. But either way, it sees all these different parts of you as not bad. The facets I wish to not face are my fall from grace, my fall from charis, right? It's trying to push away those aspects of yourself. So I am agreeing with you. That gets us into problems, right? Not the one, they're not the problem, like these parts of ourselves. It's us trying to push those parts of ourselves away that create the problem. Thanks for all the questions. See you guys next week. Yep, you guys did great. I mean, this is one of my favorite chats we've ever done. I love this, so I'm going to assume that the 3034 was helpful in that process. Grace sees me and says, I love you. I love you too. I love you. Richard, thank you. I love you too. All right. I love you all. Thanks so much for the chat. And see you guys next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. All right. Keep the questions coming. Love it. I never liked you because you loved me. I hope you liked me and me love you because I always loved you. Oh, thank you. I love you too. And I like you most of the time. I would say like 95 to 9% of the time I like you. I love you 100% of the time. That's real. Like that's genuine relationships, right? Is that we love the person unconditionally. We like the person most of the time, right? I don't know what the actual percentage is, but anyway, all right, I'm out. All right, see you guys next week. Same bad time, same bad channel.